Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gloria and I am back with another video around college related issues. I am passionate, as you know, about university and the college experience, and I've also been in university for a really long time, and so I thought I would talk about a really important subject in this video around financial precarity in university and the experience of being broke at a top law school or at a top university, and how, you know, that can be a very isolating experience and just, you know, very difficult. Get comfortable, it's going to be a long video, as these chatty videos usually are. So get your coffee, get your wine, or whatever it is you want to drink or nibble on, and then we can get chatting. I wanted to start with my story on financial precarity, and then go ahead and give you guys a few tips on a few ideas on the kind of jobs that you can take up within the university space in order to make money and to, you know, not be broke basically. Obviously right now we are under, you know, stay-at-home orders and everybody's indoors, but in the spirit of hope and, you know, looking forward, I'm gonna give you guys these tips anyway, and some of them will include things that you can do once the university campuses have opened, but some of them will be able to be applicable even from home if, you know, you have the opportunities. I was, as many of you have known if you've been watching my videos for a long time, I started my university journey in South Africa. I am Zimbabwean, but I was an international student. I've always been an international student. Now I'm at Stanford University, at Stanford Law School, and again I'm an international student. And as you know, when you're an international student, you have restrictions on not only how much you can work but what you can do, and your immigration status limits you from carrying out or, you know, finding job opportunities or opportunities to make money within your country of study, and that can be very frustrating. A lot of the time as international students, we have the most barriers to entry into you know, the job workspace, and, you know, it makes sense because these countries are trying to protect their own employment sector and to make sure that their citizens are catered to first and their citizens have employment first. And so in that sense, it's a very logical immigration policy. However, it does mean that as international students we're often left financially vulnerable, and, you know, we pour all our finances into studying abroad and into being at these top universities outside of our countries of citizenship, and yet again the reality is, you know, you can't work. Both in South Africa, and I was, you know, surprised to find out that here too in the US there is a 20-hour per week limit in terms of how many hours an international student can work if you're on a study visa. And that was the same in South Africa, that was the same as that's the same here in the US. What that has meant though is that, you know, there are very few options in terms of the things that you can do. And when I was in university during my undergraduate, I did all sorts of things. I was lucky enough that my parents were able to fund my education, but what that did mean was that all of essentially our finances went into our education, and my parents prioritized that, and that was something that as a family, you know, we all understood that education is really important for all of us, and so it was going to be the priority. That is what the household income for the most part was dedicated towards that. As a result, because my parents were funding myself, and at one point they were funding my two brothers as well, their education, it was a real big strain. But what it meant was that I didn't have extra money for, you know, the stuff that you need. It might be like textbooks or going out with friends, social stuff, academic stuff, buying clothes, buying things that you need, buying extra groceries or stuff like that. And so I had to be like very creative and very aggressive in looking for opportunities on campus that would allow me to make money. And the reason why I chose opportunities on campus was because, number one, it was really convenient. You know, I could go to and from wherever the job was, and I lived on campus in residence. But you know, and here too I live in graduate residence, and you know, when you are in a new country, you probably don't want to go out, and you know, if it's like your first year or your second year and you're still orienting yourself and trying to understand the dynamics of that community, the dynamics of that society, it's probably best to look for employment opportunities within that kind of controlled and honestly safe environment, and very convenient as well. And so that's exactly what I did. I looked for jobs in and around campus, and I was able to fund a lot of the extra things that I needed that are not necessarily tuition, because of course you need tuition, but there's all sorts of things, all sorts of extra things that you might need as a student, living items, as well as educational and academic items. So it was really important for me, as I said, to be creative around finding opportunities on campus, and I did everything. I did reception, I worked at the tuck shop. Tuck shop is like I don't know what I would call it, I guess yeah, it's like a little corner store basically, but we had one in our residence. I will talk about this as one of the things you can do to find work and make money in a safe way within you know, your country of study. However, yeah, that was something that I did. I worked as a subwarden, as a residence assistant, I worked as a teaching assistant, as a research assistant. I did not work as a computer lab assistant, but I think I might have applied. There were so many things that I did because I really needed the money, and I wanted a safe way to get money, a way that I felt comfortable doing. And then also the advantage of finding work on campus is that it's a good way to gain experience, work experience, without needing to apply into a company which you might be restricted from applying because of your immigration status. So I remember I applied for a couple of internships, and you know, recruiters would come wanting to take people for like summer internships, and they would literally look at my application, and the first thing they as soon as they realized that I was, you know, not South African, they would just say, listen, I'm sorry, this is like, we're not even gonna take you. Like, we're not, like, I've had headhunters or like recruiters just be like, if you don't have a work permit in this country, or if you don't have permanent residency, I'm not even gonna look at your CV. And so I remember that just being so crushing, because especially in the law school, you know that companies come very early on and firms come very early on in the law school to recruit students, to do internships, and as well as to hire them for articles when they finish their LLB. And so I was never able to take advantage of those opportunities because I was a Zimbabwean citizen who was studying law in South Africa. So I mean, we can have a conversation about the nature of immigration laws as they pertain to people who study in a specific country but don't have the citizenship, and therefore are blocked off from entering the employment sector. However, you know, that's a whole other conversation, and it's a whole other debate for another space. I think that at the end of the day, my reality was simply that, listen, I didn't have access into the legal field professionally at that junior or like early stage where you're interning or you are doing your articles of clerkship. I also could not get other jobs in South Africa or in my country of study that I could take advantage of, that would have been able to pay more for me and allow me to work. And because we know that the students themselves, who are citizens of the countries in which you are also studying, they oftentimes are working and studying at the same time, and they have to do that because, you know, it's so expensive. And so it's unfortunate that as international students, who most of the time are paying way higher fees, are assumed to have the money to, you know, you're assumed because you're coming from outside into the system that you have the funding both to sustain yourself in terms of living expenses as well as cover your tuition. And that's just not the reality, right? And that was my experience. And even on a social level, I will say that it was very hard to attend a top law school and, you know, but be struggling financially. It was hard on my mental health, and, you know, it's only stuff that I realized later on, probably when I was doing my master's. That's when I was like, hey, that wasn't a cool experience. Like, there's a little bit of trauma there, you know. But I think it's something that people don't talk about, and you know, everyone talks about college life being just like you're roughing it, and you know, you're eating like struggle meals and you're just getting through it. And so we laugh about that experience of, you know, roughing it in college. But it's also, if we're, I think, very honest with ourselves, it can be a very traumatic experience, and a lot of stuff can lead, it can really spiral into a really terrible experience, because you need money to survive. And when you are in a foreign country by yourself, sometimes you don't have any support system at all. Sometimes it's your first time in this country, sometimes you don't speak the language, and you are trying to find ways of supporting yourself. Then I think, you know, using the university campus as a resource for jobs, for experience, both professionally and personally, can be a really good strategy in order to survive university life. And I think this is good advice for people who are going to be starting out university soon. Again, you know, we don't know what the university campus and the dynamics of student life are going to be like post this time. However, you know, in the hopes that things are going to be somewhat normal or somewhat the usual as they have been, some of the things that I will suggest will be useful for you, I think, based on my extensive experience in the academy and, you know, trying to survive it financially as an international student. The final thing I wanted to say was, yeah, you know, from the perspective of socially as well, it can be very isolating to not have money. In my experience, I passed up a lot of that, you know, wild college life experience because I was working a lot of the time. I was, you know, trying to juggle my academics and having several different jobs a lot of the time, and other commitments, whether they be leadership commitments in the university community or, you know, other personal commitments to family, to friends, etc. And, you know, trying to also keep up with, you know, going out all the time, having drinks. So just that wild, you know, carefree, I don't know, like experience. I feel like on some level I missed out on because I was so busy. Part of that was because I was trying to make money, and so I completely empathize with those of us who go to university, attend university. A lot of these spaces are elitist spaces, and if you go to a top school, it's even more elite. And so if you are a person of color, if you are a black person or a woman or anyone who is a part of a community that is previously disadvantaged, if you are an individual who doesn't have historically, you know, academics in your social circle or in your immediate circle, family, friends, this can be a very unique and lonely experience because no one can relate, right? a lot of our families kind of just ship us off to a foreign country to learn, and all they know is like, my child is there and they're learning and they're coming back with a degree. But I think the nuances of that experience are often overlooked, especially once we come out the other end and we have it. No one really talks about that journey and how not having money at university is really stressful and it can really impact your well-being. Very scary at times, because like financial precarity is scary, because you don't know where your next meal coming from. I remember at some point surviving on 1,000 rand a month, and I think that was like in 2015, 16. It's not a lot of money. Granted, I was in, in housing, so I wasn't paying rent, so I was in student housing. However, I at that time was in a self-catered housing, and so I was buying my own groceries and all that stuff, and so it wasn't much. Like, I could survive on it, but I couldn't have a social life. I couldn't buy textbooks sometimes. I couldn't, that's something that, like, I went through most of law school. I think I might have bought like 3 textbooks in total in my 4 years of law school. So those are just some of the experiences that nobody talks about, but I think it's important to have those really honest conversations about the reality of the expense of the university experience, not just tuition, but all the extra things that you need, like a laptop. Like, there was a point in time when I didn't have a laptop for like a really long time. I think it might have been like a year that I spent with like a borrowed laptop from a friend. And those are the realities of not being well off but still attending a university that is a top university, where sometimes a lot of assumptions are made in the way that the program and in the way the systems work, that assume that you have all of these resources and these connections and all of this stuff at your disposal, when the reality is that you don't. Anyway, with all of that said, I want to give you some ideas on things that you can do, or jobs that you can apply for when you are at university.